At exactly 6 a.m., I stood in what used to be my assigned parking space, now a muddy crater, with a garden hose still running and a half-buried yellow traffic cone floating like some sad survivor of a war. There I was, shirtless, soaked to the bone, holding a rusted shovel in one hand and my coffee in the other. And standing there, blinking at me in complete disbelief, was HOA Officer Dan. "What the hell happened here?" he asked, his walkie-talkie crackling with static. I took a slow sip from my coffee, looked him dead in the eye, and replied with a straight face, "Karen happened." So, I made it a pond. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted from just parking space drama to something much more personal. But let me rewind a bit to how this all started. It wasn't always like this. Just a week earlier, everything had been fine. Or so I thought. Karen moved into the neighborhood about 5 months ago. From the first moment, it felt like I was watching some kind of reality show play out in real time. She was one of those women who wore oversized sunglasses at dusk, like she was about to step off a yacht, and she had this ridiculous little teacup poodle that she dressed up in tutus. Every day, like clockwork, she'd cruise around the neighborhood in her personalized golf cart, glitter decals practically sparkling under the sun. I'm not the type to judge. Who am I to judge? But there was something about the way she carried herself, something that screamed entitlement. It all started with her parking in my space. Now, mind you, this wasn't just any parking spot. It was the one closest to my door, the one designated for my wife. See, my wife has mobility issues after a bad accident. The spot had been designated years ago as a reasonable accommodation for her, and there's even a little metal sign that reads, "Reserved." The first time Karen parked there, I let it slide. It's an easy mistake, right? Everyone makes them. But then the second time, I left a sticky note on her windshield. By the third time, I reported it to the HOA. But by the fifth time, well, I finally realized Karen wasn't confused. She just didn't care. She chose to ignore it. And that was when things started to get a little more personal. This spot wasn't just any spot. This spot was a lifeline for my wife. But Karen? She chose to interpret that sign as vacant when I feel like it. Every time I approached her, she'd wave me off and say, "It's just for a second," and what started as a second often turned into half a day. Every time I reported it, the HOA responded with the same robotic indifference, "We'll investigate the matter," only for them to somehow dismiss my Danke, claiming I digitally altered the timestamps on my photos. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. My wife had a specialist appointment across town, a rare opening we'd waited months for. We walked outside, her walker in hand, only to find Karen's Miata parked square in our spot again. I knocked on her door for 10 full minutes, my patience wearing thin. Finally, she opened the door, still mid-conversation on her phone, not even breaking the call. She smirked, said, "Oops," and shut the door in my face. No apology, no offer to move, no nothing. We had to cancel the appointment. My wife, she tried to stay calm, but I saw it in her eyes that hurt. That was when something inside me clicked. I was done. Done being nice. Done playing by the rules. Karen had declared war on decency, and now I was ready to fight back. The next morning, I went to Karen's house again. I politely asked her, one last time, to stop parking in my spot. She gave me that smirk of hers and said, "You can't own a piece of asphalt, sweetheart. Don't be so dramatic." That same afternoon, I noticed a new scratch across my rear bumper, deep, purposeful, unmistakably fresh. I didn't even confront her this time. Instead, I reviewed the footage from my driveway camera. At 2:47 p.m., Karen brushed against my car with her purse, looked right at the camera, grinned, and then casually keyed my bumper. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. The arrogance, the sheer audacity. She didn't even try to hide it. Instead of confronting her, I cited an old friend of mine, Lewis. He worked in city zoning, and over beers and chips, I floated an idea. What if I turned my parking spot into part of my landscaping? Technically, the land was on my property line. Lewis chuckled, then raised an eyebrow. "Actually," he said, "you might be able to get away with it." And just like that, we had a plan. By the next morning, I had filed for a minor excavation permit to turn the spot into what I would officially call stormwater management landscaping. And by the end of the week, I had approval. That weekend, the real fun began. I started small, just digging around the edges with my backyard tools while Karen watched from her porch, arms crossed, and looking like she was judging me harder than a movie critic at a premiere. A few neighbors asked if I was adding a flower bed. I simply nodded, something like that. Then, on Sunday afternoon, I rented a mini excavator. I was operating within the HOA's rules. Landscaping tools were allowed to be temporarily parked on property. Another loophole. By Monday morning, my parking spot had turned into a shallow basin, roughly the size of a small above-ground pool. And Karen? She was livid. She marched across the yard, red-faced, arms swinging like she was conducting a furious orchestra. "You can't just dig up the parking lot," she shouted. I calmly handed her a copy of the city-approved permit. She snatched it, squinted at it like she was staring at some ancient manuscript, and said, "This is outrageous. I'll call the HOA." I smiled. "Please do. And tell them to bring a tape measure." That night, I installed a simple garden hose irrigation system, letting just a trickle of water feed into the depression. Then I added a few water plants for effect. By morning, Karen stormed out of her house, screaming, "You're flooding the neighborhood." The irony wasn't lost on me. After all, she'd flooded my life with stress for weeks. And before long, nature began to add its own touch. Birds landed, bugs buzzed, and, to my delight, a pair of ducks decided to sit. The pond, which was supposed to be a punishment, became a sanctuary, something peaceful, something mine. The HOA sent me a notice telling me to stop unauthorized construction. I invited Dan, the HOA officer, over. He took one look at the permit and muttered, "Well, I'll be damned," before walking off, clearly realizing he was in way over his head. Karen's Miata ended up blocking my driveway one day, parked right in front of it, since her usual spot was underwater. She left for the day, and I called the city parking authority. When she returned, she found a bright orange tow sticker on her window and a note warning a future impound. The look on her face when she saw the ducks waddling through the pond, the very pond she had tried to destroy, was priceless. But of course, Karen wasn't finished yet. She never was. One morning, I walked out to find my hose cut clean in half and the water timer ripped from the soil. It didn't take a genius to figure out who had done it. I found an empty container of pool shock dumped nearby, chlorine, industrial grade. She tried to poison my pond. I reviewed the footage, and there she was, Karen, dressed in white, sneaking up to the hose and pouring chemicals in. I saved the video and made sure to send it to the city's environmental compliance officer. The next few days, an HOA meeting was called, and Karen presented a 14-page document accusing me of everything from wildlife trafficking to mosquito weaponization. I handed over the footage of her tampering with my pond, her keying my car, and even flipping off the drone. The room went silent. Then Todd, the mayor's assistant, stood up and said, "I'm in support of the pond." That was it. Karen was done. The HOA decided to do nothing. But, as always, Karen had a final act of desperation left. I came home one day to find her trying to paint over a small plaque I'd installed near the pond that said, "Reserved for pond watchers." She didn't hear me approach. I stood there for a moment, watching this grown woman angrily dabbing pink nail polish on the plaque. When she saw me, she froze, hiding the bottle behind her back and stammering, "Just fixing the vandalism." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She backed away slowly and walked off, her gloves stained with polish. It was the final nail in her coffin. A few days later, a video of the ducks wedding went viral in our little neighborhood. It was the final blow to Karen's ego. The pond had become a symbol of community spirit, and Karen was left watching from her window, seething. And eventually, she moved. In the dead of night, like a VY lane slinking away after a failed heist. The real estate agent tried to sell her house at an inflated price, but nobody cared about the house. They wanted to see the pond, to take pictures with the ducks. Karen was gone, and I had my peace. The new neighbors loved the pond. The HOA, now free of Karen's complaints, relaxed. Life was good. But I'll tell you this, what started as a petty parking spot dispute turned into something much bigger. It became a legacy, a piece of community history, and a beautiful pond. With ducks.